Justice League: The Road to Dark Crisis issue 1 with the various names because there's like 5 stories in it, so I'll read them out in a minute. But I got a little worried about this because after the one shot for Shadow War, which was like the anthology, and I ended up thinking that was a giant waste of time. I was a bit worried at this one that I was going to feel the same way. I was like, okay, I hope this actually has some meat in it because otherwise I'm going to be really annoyed. It was better than the Shadow War one, but I wouldn't say by a ton. Like this
is what the Free Comic Book Day special should have been, because this felt like the countdown to Infinite Crisis, where the whole Blue Beetle thing happens with Max Lord with the reveal. I was getting vibes from that, but that was executed a lot better because it was one story that was taking you through the different beats of what to expect.
I think the biggest downside to this one is that I feel like the first 4 or 5 stories all kind of just make the same point, but the first one probably does it best, even though I do think it's a little off in because the first one is Nightwing and John, yeah, Superman, and it's them talking about the Justice League being gone, and Dick's kind of in this weird place where he's like, look, I've seen Clark die before, I've seen Bruce die before, and they always come back. He talks about Barry. In fact, it got to the point halfway through this story where I was almost starting to laugh. I'm like, you're almost kind of pointing out how meaningless death is in the DC universe.
Well, but after Blackest Night, we kind of all realized that, right? So to be making the point, how many years has it been since Blackest Night?
13 years.
Yeah, so
12, 13. No, like it's true. It's not really a new observation, but it's just like them actually discussing it in universe almost makes it look really silly. Like that they shouldn't really take death seriously. I did appreciate though a couple of pages later where John points out not everyone comes back, and you see Dick thinking about his parents and Alfred. I mean, we'll see if Alfred comes back at some point because I'm not necessarily ruling it out yet. But but yeah, I will say the art in this is very 90s, which is interesting given that we're talking a lot about Death of Superman.
Because it's Dan Jurgens, right?
Yeah, it's Dan Jurgens. Yeah,
it was one of the masterminds of Death of Superman.
So the one thing I will say, because this is Williamson writing this first story, is it did feel like they got a little argumentative really easily, and Dick came off a little like, I mean, it actually reminded me even in the writing style a lot in 90s comics where characters did seem to get a little angrier more often, and it kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. I did generally like the idea of what it was going for though, which is that John's trying to convince Dick to come and speak at this vigil for the Justice League, and Dick wasn't wanting to do it because, and I think the reason why I like it a little bit is because Dick's realizing he was acting like Bruce when Bruce didn't want to accept that Superman was dead and went all stoic and stuff like that. But after they take on some bad guys, Dick's like, yeah, I'll come and speak at the vigil. And, it's got that final page where you see them, this John's flying, Dick's running, and above them you see, Clark and Bruce in costume. It's kind of showing you this is the old generation, this is the new generation, so on, so on.
Well, and I do like that it's Dick who's been around and has seen all this type of stuff. Of course, he's a little bit more cynical versus John, who this is his first. I mean,
Dick has literally lived through almost every member of the Justice League dying at some point.
Right. And for John, this is all new territory. So of course, he's the more hopeful. Like, no, well, they'll find ways back. Better than anybody, and that's where like the. They.
Oh no, it's the opposite. Dick's the one saying that they'll find their ways back. John's the one who's like, no, this is serious. The Justice League. We need to build a new Justice League.
Well, I'm still gonna make my point of that's it's sinking heavier on Dick that not everybody comes back, right? Because it's his parents and Alfred. Those are the constants.
So I don't think that I like generally what this first story is doing. I do think it's a little off in like their voices at times, but
we're used to Tom Taylor doing both, not Williamson.
That's true, but I also think it's not just because of Tom Taylor though. I think even before Tom Taylor touched either of these characters, these would feel a little off. Dick especially, I think Dick especially comes off a little bit in the like when John pushes for him to go to this vigil thing, he comes off a little aggressive in a way that just felt a little character to me.
No, that's true. I mean, that's not too bad. Can we talk about them having a beef? How do you say it? Beef bourguignon from a food truck. Which
I mean, I've never had this. I have no idea what this is, but
so it's like beef stew. I had to look this up.
Okay.
Through I forget what comic it came out, but it was beef bourguignon with ketchup is Clark Kent's favorite meal, and so for them to throw that in and just be at a food truck in Metropolis, I was just like, it's gross. And then when they say that, Dick's like, yeah, it's disgusting, but I figured you need some comfort food. I just thought that's a very Dick Grayson move. I felt, yeah, the story pretty good. I'm always a fan of Jurgens art, because as you said, it has that '90s throwback feel.
Yeah, so that was called Team Up. I'll just give you all the creative teams just now because I'm not going to go back to this credits page every time.
I'll keep it open if you want to just do them as we go.
Oh, sure, you keep it open then.
Yeah.
So yeah, the next one though is Life of Purpose by Jeremy Adams writing and Rosie Campe on the art. So this is obviously Jeremy Adams is the Flash writer.
Yeah.
So this is very much the Flash story. And while I like checking in with Iris coming to see like Wally and Linda and saying that Barry's been missing for a while, and she didn't think much of it at first because he's a superhero and sometimes he runs away and has to deal with like events for a while. I thought this ultimately amounted to basically nothing. I think it was pleasant enough to read, and the idea that Wally and Wallace are going out to deal with all the villains that are coming out of the woodwork because they think that Justice League are dead, so it's time to go and try and be extra villainous. Ultimately, there's not really much of a story to it, and that it's just that we have to keep being superheroes and keep the world in a good place and speed off together and just be heroes, and that's it. They just the final page is just Wally running off after he looks at the Barry statue at the Flash Museum saying the world can always count on its heroes, and that's it. And so at the end of it I was like, this really like amounted to nothing. Like I didn't need to exist.
It's kind of the Flashes during a crisis, in that Wally telling Ace, as we're gonna call him now, that I stepped up for Barry before. The world keeps moving. That's what Flashes do. We keep moving. And it just kind of sowing those seeds for the Barry Allen, where is he, that we're going to get through Adams' Flash tie-in.
Yeah, obviously, yeah, it's sort of setting up the Flash tie-in story, which is fine. I just didn't feel like it had much. It felt like this was a 8-page, 10-page story that was just kind of crafted to go into this book without it needing to exist. Like I didn't really feel like there was like a strong idea for what this on its own was, other than just let's just put a few pages into tease what we're doing in Flash coming up. And then alternatively, the next story, which is the Green Lantern story with Hal, who was not present for the death of the Justice League. It was John who got snuffed.
Yep.
Who's this by?
This is Chuck Brown and Fico Osio on art. So Chuck Brown's been doing the Aqua stuff. I think Black Manta. That
makes sense because this is very much Hal and Jackson. Because Hal's chasing this life form to Earth that goes straight into the ocean. So Jackson and Co sense it, and he goes out to, and he ends up interacting with Hal basically for the first time because you can tell from the interactions they're not really spoken before. And he actually has to break the news to Hal that not only is Arthur dead, but the entire Justice League are seemingly dead. But they do something to deal with this creature, which ends up being kind of friendly once they separate all of its nastiness away from it.
Yeah, so there's some parasites that's trying to replicate, and it's trying to use the waters, and Hal points out that it's destroyed every ecosystem it's come into contact with, but Jackson, being this newer hero, is like, well, let's try to figure out what's wrong with it instead of just trying to beat it into submission. And he does some Aquaman centrifugal spin thing, and then it separates the parasites from the creature, and happy ending. It's just that it was just kind of weird, just kind of Jackson soliloquying about Arthur and how he's gonna have to stay in Atlantis because Atlantis needs him. And that stuff. It was kind of off. Like, why? I understand needing Hal having an entry point, but why Jackson? Why Aquaman? It's just weird.
I mean, I assume it's set like in Dark Crisis. There's going to maybe be a like we'll cut to Atlantis and what they're doing a few times, and this is just kind of setting up like who's there, whatever. I mean, this and the Flash story feel very similar to me in that they don't do too much. They're just kind of like checking in different corners without having much of a story. And I appreciate like checking in on the various corners and seeing what's going on. They both kind of amount to like I'll rate the book as a whole when we get to the end, but this and the Flash story are both kind of just like sixes to me, where they're pleasant enough, but they kind of feel also like not necessary at all. Like I don't think like you would miss any of this book if you go straight into Dark Crisis. I'll say that. But that's basically that. And then the next story is a Pariah story. Who's this by?
This is Philip Kennedy Johnson on the script and Layla DeLuca on art.
Yeah, so it's Pariah kind of seeing his dead family, and it's like this is him like trapped in a prison of his own mind, sort of reliving things and trying to like basically dealing with this, him having to go to all these worlds that were dying and trying to accept that everything's dead and all of it's not real. But then eventually he sort of wakes up from it and he sees destruction, and the great darkness talks to him, making it suffer.
I took it as the great darkness infected him, because his whole thing is, if I do nothing, then the multiverse survives. It's if I get involved, the multiverse will die. And so finally it's the great darkness, infecting him and making him, putting him into action, which is what we saw in the what was that, the Justice League Incarnate.
So this is a weirder one, and obviously it's distinctly different from the rest of the stories, because it's not just the regular heroes reacting to what's happened. This is trying to go into the backstory of Pariah a little bit and like setting up how he came to be in the position that he was in. I will say, because it also kind of falls on from, because there was those two like giant one shots, right? That kind of had Pariah in them, and it kind of set up that some of the stuff that was building up to like this before he went into the Dark Crisis stuff. It's somewhat interesting, but I will say, despite being Johnson writing, which I would expect good things from, I think there's only so much you can do when you're given the task of just sort of trying to make this work, which is ultimately not really much beyond just the great darkness has reached out to him and put this in his head.
Well, I just like it in the meta context of Philip Kennedy Johnson, the story he's telling in action, and about hope, and about being inspired, and Superman doing what he needs to do to this world. And here's with Pariah, it's like, if you let the darkness in, the darkness is going to lie to you and tell you things that aren't true, and it kind of, for me, it was almost kind of like a thing of anxiety or depression, like in the general sense, right? Is that, Pariah just wants his family back, right? And he ends up letting the great darkness, in, so he can, and lie to him, because as he says, his family's dead in every universe at this point, and he just has to come to terms with that. But the great darkness gets into him. And, I just like that metaphor throughout, and it might not pay off at all in Dark Crisis, but so far out of these, it was the one that I felt the most emotionally, I guess.
I think it has the best.
That it was Philip Kennedy Johnson,
It has the best concept, but I don't think this is the sort of thing where I feel like this would have done much better if it actually had a full issue to itself to actually develop the ideas that it's playing with. Because everything you just said to me there, like, I get where you're coming from, but I don't know if the story actually gets that across to me.
I might have been reading a bit too closer into things, so
yeah, maybe. It's a weird thing where I kind of appreciate that it's trying to give us okay, this is how the great darkness has corrupted him or swayed him to his side kind of thing. But that's the sort of thing where I'm like, that deserves at least a 20-page story, if not like maybe an oversized thing where
let it breathe. I agree with you there. It should have been allowed to breathe, but for being as economical as it was, I still feel that the story,
I think it barely scratches the surface. It feels like a bullet point rather than a story to me.
No, that's true. I'm not going to argue there.
Yeah. So yeah, that is a shame. Like honestly, like this book could have done with that, and that this story just been the entire thing, and just really getting into the idea of how he is manipulated to do it. And I believe Johnson could probably pull that off, but I don't think in the 8 to 10 pages that he gets here, I don't think he's able to do it. So yeah, and I realize I'm being quite down on this, but honestly, like it is just kind of mediocre, I would say, by and large. This one shot, and I think it all being these 8 to 10 page stories is what's hurting it, because I like have an idea that sets up and benefits what we're doing with the event, and stick to it. The more I read of these, like 50-page books that's like 5-10 page stories, the less I feel like they're worth bothering with, because most of the time they just feel like these little snapshots that aren't really offering much in terms of a story. Anyway, final stories about Nocturna. And that's to be fair, I didn't really enjoy a lot of this one, but I will say it felt like it had more purpose in that by the end you realize that the Secret Society are recruiting more villains for something that's obviously going to be a subplot in Dark Crisis, right?
Right.
So Nocturna's recruited at the end by was it Firefly? Yeah, Firefly. And we see this like page where we see all these villains who are teaming up, and a lot of B-listers and C-listers certainly in this group, but
AKA cannon fodder.
Yeah. Because I recognize Silver Banshee, I recognize Girder, I think is there in the back, and
well, and this is Stephanie Phillips. It's called Because the Night. Stephanie Phillips and Clayton Henry on the art, which I'm surprised it was Clayton Henry. I didn't pick that up until just now.
And she fights Stephanie Brown in this in the museum she breaks into for a little bit, and has a bit of a quid pro quo with her before Batgirl's called away to deal with something else. But I would say that I didn't really enjoy the story that much, but at least by the end I felt like, okay, this set up a plot thread that I assume is going to be in the event, whereas a lot of the other ones I don't know if I necessarily got that vibe. And the idea that Wally's going to be dealing with stuff with Barry missing, like, you didn't really need to set that up. Like, we kind of just knew that. Like, nothing was going to feel weird going into the next Flash issue and like, okay, Barry's missing and there's crisis stuff happening, I have to do something. Like, it would have flowed perfectly fine. So this is a weird mixed bag of an issue to me, that I mean I suppose the nicest thing I'll say about it is that it wasn't too much of a chore to read, but at the same time I would also describe it as completely inessential.
That's why I kind of wish it was a countdown when we had more of an actual thread that was tying them together. And almost the Pariah story would have been a good one, like expand that a little bit, and have him building up to the decision he makes or gets infected by the Great Darkness, and he's these are different things that he's seeing in the build up. I don't know, something along those lines. But yeah, it just feels like a mixed bag, like you said. Like, they're just randomly thrown together because Dark Crisis.
I kind of feel like the first 3 stories could have been combined into one, where it's like narration like cuts between the various characters, and you only like a page or 2 in each one, rather than try to flesh them out into 8-page stories.
Right.
And then the Pariah story could have been done with like having a 20-30 page like proper like exploration of him being corrupted and getting to the point where he's taken over by the Great Darkness with the power that he has in Death of Justice League. So so it kind of like, I'd say, mishandles some of the things that it's doing. And likewise, the final story, I think just a couple of pages again, in like sort of like a, in the same way that Rebirth one shot is the one that comes to mind, where that the way that kind of like bounces around, just showing you all the characters, and they're all only like a panel or a page each as it goes around the DCU, just sort of saying, here's where people are. Like, I feel like that's kind of what you wanted here, is just to like go around and show how they're all dealing and coping with the apparent death of the Justice League. And then the Pariah story is the one that's separate, that should be delved into more. So kind of a weird mixed bag that I wouldn't say kind of tackles the subjects that it's tackling in the right manner. I feel like the scope and the style of comic should have been different to tackle it. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's alright.
What are you rating about?
I'm gonna give it a 6.5.
Yeah, I was gonna go a straight 6. It's, you know, I'd say it's inoffensive, but it's totally not essential.